I would put the chances of Cuomo high-fiving or fist-bumping some of his campaign officials in his office somewhere around 98 to 99%. Complete conjecture on my part. But what is quite clear is that following that press conference, he huddled with his people and said, I can't let de Blasio be the face of this. We're not going to have an Ebola patient fly into Albany or Syracuse or Elmira. So I got to get out in front of this now. Who's the scummiest guy I can have a press conference with who's probably trying to put himself out in front of this too? Oh, great. Of course, Chris Christie. We control the Port Authority. We can talk about this. So they get up on Friday together and announce a program of automatically quarantining any aid workers who are returning from West Africa. They consult with none of the public health officials in New York City. Like I say, undoubtedly, some of the best public health officials in the world. They obviously don't consult the White House or any of the best public health officials we have nationally. And within a day, we hear from a nurse who returns from dealing with Ebola patients in Sierra Leone. And she is the first person to be quarantined by this Chris Christie, Andrew Cuomo. Will this buy us an extra 4 points in our election in a week? Administrations. And she writes an op-ed about her experience as she is in a tent because she doesn't live in New Jersey. She lives in Maine. She's in a tent with like a little porta potty. Where she is being subjected to fairly inhumane conditions. She recounts the story of arriving at Newark Airport, tired, hungry, and confused. At one point, they take her temperature using a forehead scanner. It reads a temperature of 98. I was feeling physically healthy but emotionally exhausted. 3 hours passed. No one seemed to be in charge. No one would tell me what was going on and what would happen to me. I called my family to let them know I was okay. I was hungry and thirsty and asked for something to eat and drink. I was given a granola bar and some water. I wondered what I had done wrong. 4 hours after I landed at the airport, an official approached me with a forehead scanner. My cheeks were flushed. I was upset at being held with no explanation. The scanner recorded my temperature at 101. The female officer looked smug. You have a fever now, she said. I explained that an oral thermometer would be more accurate and that the forehead scanner was recording an elevated temperature because I was flushed and upset. I was left alone in the room for another 3 hours. At around 7 p.m., I was told that I must go to a local hospital. 8 police cars escorted me to the University Hospital in Newark. Sirens blared, lights flashed. Again, I wondered what I had done wrong. I had spent a month watching children die alone. I had witnessed human tragedy unfold before my eyes. I had tried to help when much of the world has looked on and done nothing. At the hospital, I was escorted to a tent that sat outside of a building. The infectious disease and emergency department doctors took my temperature and other vitals and looked puzzled. Your temperature is 98.6, they said. You don't have a fever, but we were told you have a fever. After my temperature was recorded at 98.6 on the oral thermometer, the doctor decided to see what the forehead scanner recorded. It read 101. The doctor felt my neck and looked at my temperature again. There's no way you have a fever, he said. Your face is just flushed. My blood was taken and tested for Ebola. It came back negative. I sat alone in the isolation tent and thought of many colleagues who will return home to America and face the same ordeal. Will they be made to feel like criminals and prisoners? I recalled my last night at the Ebola Management Center in Sierra Leone. I was called in at midnight because a 10-year-old girl was having seizures. I coaxed crushed tablets of Tylenol and an anti-seizure medicine into her mouth as her body jolted in the bed. It was the hardest night of my life. I watched a young girl die in a tent away from her family. The epidemic continues to ravage West Africa. Recently, the WHO announced that as many as 15,000 people have died from Ebola. We need more healthcare workers to help fight the epidemic in West Africa. The U.S. must treat returning healthcare workers with dignity and humanity. The bottom line here is you cannot protect Americans from Ebola to the extent at this point that there's any real danger to Americans. And again, if you want to wear a mask when you're traveling, it's a good idea because it will protect you from the flu. Otherwise, you're just going to look silly. The only way to stop an Ebola outbreak is to stop it in West Africa. The only way at this point to stop an outbreak in West Africa is to get volunteers to go to West Africa to stop the outbreak there. If you treat people who return from helping in West Africa as criminals instead of dedicated professionals who know better than anyone the danger of Ebola, you're not going to stop the outbreak in West Africa, and then we're all going to have some problems. So Cuomo and Christie instituted this policy. By Sunday night, Cuomo had backed off the policy somewhat and basically said, to the extent that they will be quarantined, they got to do so at home. And if a person loses pay because of work days missed, the governor will be that worker will be compensated in some fashion, and state officials will talk to employers if necessary. I suppose it's possible that there can be some type of quarantine regime that can be set up that will not dissuade people from going and volunteering to help end this crisis in West Africa. But when morons like Christie and Cuomo get together, I just don't know that we're going to get that type of policy. Meanwhile, on Sunday, Chris Christie was not backing down. He went on Fox and said, it was about 24 hours ago, I absolutely have no second thoughts about this. It's unclear if he wanted to do this with teachers as well. However, 24 hours later, Chris Christie apparently has had some second thoughts. And the woman who has been the nurse who was kept in this quarantine tent in New Jersey is going to be allowed to go back to Maine. What a moron. Just a bunch of morons. And this is basically, what we're now seeing in terms of, at least partially in terms of our elections. We have elections at this point that are about virtually nothing other than a grab bag of gaffes. And you have politicians racing to be the ones who are going to not deal with the reality of Ebola, but address the most base fears of the electorate. Pathetic. It's pathetic. And we see this across the board. We see it with ISIS. We see it with terrorism. It's really just, it's bizarre, frankly.